your deck if you're ready. Take it away.
Great. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. I want to thank you all, first of all, for attending here. We think it's a pretty important topic, and we've engaged some of our experts here at InterDYN BMI to give you some good information. So thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to talking to you today. It's going to be a pretty straightforward webinar. We're going to start with the basics. Why are you guys here? What's the reason that cybersecurity is such a hot topic right now? From there, we're going to move on to a panel discussion with Fred and Caleb, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you can do, what your next steps might be if you want to take a more direct interest in your IT security. Let's start with why you're here today. You're here today because if you look around every day, in fact, I just, in reading my news feed in Google today, saw another cyber attack. It's very timely for our election season. The DNC was actually hacked recently by Russian hackers who, of all things, plucked intelligence from the DNC on Donald Trump. So this is very timely. These are happening all the time, and if you talk to any C-level executive, it's always a top 5 concern in what they're looking at right now and where their main area of focus is. The other reasons why you're here today is we know that there are a lot of cyber threats out there. They're very real, very tangible. Most people can speak to an incident where something happened, as simple as getting a Facebook account hacked, or possibly full identity theft, all the way down to CryptoLocker or other ransomware. It's a pretty diverse and growing threat landscape out there, and when we talk about things like ransomware, which usually is around a CryptoLocker, a crypto virus of some sort, it's even a little more frightening because you can actually go out there. You don't need to be a skilled cyber criminal. You can be a regular guy down the street, and you can go out and get this crimeware, these CryptoLocker viruses, deploy them, and become a threat to the community at large. It's kind of unfortunate, but it's easier and easier for people to get that information. I want to back some of this up with just some statistics that I think are pretty relevant to our discussion. There are 80 to 90 million plus cybersecurity events every year. This translates somewhere to 400 new threats every minute, and there are nearly 1 million new malware threats that are released every day. And the biggest concern about this is that 70% of those attacks go undetected. You may not even know you're infected. You may be, the cyber criminal might not be going after your data and your information. They might just want to use your computer to attack other people. It's a pretty, diverse and complex landscape that we have there. There's been a 38% increase in security incidents from 2014 to 2015. Everything that you read says that 2016 is on pace to top that, and we're only barely halfway into the year. So again, growing threat, something that you need to address, you need to think about. And kind of interesting here, the most targeted industries, it starts right up there with finance and technology companies, but healthcare and manufacturing suffer a lot of attacks. Retail, with some of us being from Minnesota, we're all aware of the breach of Target's data systems. And then, of course, government and even education institutions. Educational institutions, universities, colleges, school districts are typically pretty vulnerable to these attacks. And one final statistic, over 169 million personal records were exposed to cyber attacks, or in cyber attacks in 2015. Pretty big information. And looking around here, again, we talk about big companies, we talk about Target, we talk about you know, the IRS, you know, large organizations, but it's not just them that the cyber criminals are targeting. We know that 44% of small to mid-sized businesses are have suffered cyber attacks. The reasons for this is that SMBs tend to spend less time and money than larger firms. That's pretty normal. That makes a lot of sense. But it can cost an average of $8,700 per attack, and a lot of small businesses do not survive this. After suffering a cyber attack, most of them go out of business, or a majority of them rather. Interesting statistic here from Visa, small to mid-sized businesses, SMBs, account for 90% of reported data breaches. And the reasons for this, why? There's typically a lack of resources. So you have a limited or no dedicated IT staff. There's gaps in knowledge and information. You may not even be aware of what the threats are or how to address them. And you might have limited IT spend, so you don't necessarily have, you know, again, the financial resources to back this up. But more importantly here, I think a lot of this it involves no IT planning or strategy. If it's not on your radar, if your CAO is not thinking about it, that's a problem. You need to prepare for these things. So that gives us a little bit of a background, and you know, I hate to, you know, try to terrify people, but you know, it's real tangible threats. But the best part about this is that there are ways to address this, and right here we have a couple of guys with a lot of knowledge that we're going to share with you. Our panel today is Fred Limmer and Caleb Seeloff. Fred is our IT practice manager at InterDYN BMI. He's spent about 20 years consulting and providing IT services for clients, both large and small, and in virtually every vertical. With over 10 years of experience managing his own consulting firm, Fred has developed a breadth of business management knowledge and brings a forward-thinking methodology to IT planning and practice. His primary focus is in understanding the business needs of our customers, because knowing how to best spend on technology is as important as the technology itself. Caleb Seeloff is an 11-year U.S. Army veteran who has served multiple deployments. His roles in the Army have included Information Assurance Security Officer, Information Management Officer, and Cybersecurity Consultant and IT Director. For the Department of Defense, he developed a cybersecurity defense automation software product that is used by the DoD Cybersecurity Center in Southwest Asia. This software helps protect over 10,000 computer systems, some of which are classified as top secret. As a network engineer for InterDYN BMI, he engineers efficient and secure networks for businesses both locally and across the U.S. And Caleb recently completed his master's in IT management and currently maintains IT certifications for CCNA and CompTIA, Advanced Security Practitioner. So Fred and Caleb, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time for this.
Well, thanks for having us, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin.
Well, we'll just roll right into it and get started here. I think what we want to start with is we just want to talk about what the most common things businesses currently do to protect their networks.
Sure. I'll start with that one. So a lot of threats that challenge cybersecurity can be broken down into external and internal threats. So your external threats are probably what a lot of people think of. You've got your black hat hacker who's trying to get at your data. He's trying to cause a data breach, maybe selling information, selling social security numbers. That's one example of an external threat. And your internal threats, you also, one thing that businesses often don't consider is the threats of their own employees. And we take different precautions, implement different security systems to protect against each, both preventative or proactive and reactive. So some of the preventative things that a lot of businesses do to protect against the external threats, within the last 10 years or so, a common practice is conducting what's called full disk encryption. So this is encrypting essentially your hard drives, your data at rest, on any of your mobile devices. Typically, we're concerned about mobile devices because if somebody, say, takes their laptop, company employee, and they bring it home for the night, a lot of people work from home or work from customer sites, and their car gets broken into while they're in for lunch or something. The attacker then can't actually access the data on the hard drive if it has this full disk encryption. So that's a common practice against that. Other common practices that more of you are probably familiar with, we have most businesses have some sort of network firewall or firewalls in place. You have your endpoint antivirus, anti-malware protection. That's pretty much a de facto standard that you should see on every client and server in your network. We also see more of a rise in multi-factor authentication, especially for elevated user accounts like your sysadmins to gain any administrative access to critical systems. Quite often you'll see not just a username and password anymore being enough to authenticate, but you also have some sort of token. Common one is a RSA token. It kind of fits on your keychain. It has a number that just kind of randomly changes, seemingly randomly changes every 30 seconds or so, and that has to be used in conjunction with your password to kind of have that stronger authentication to ensure that somebody who logs in, they have both something they know, their password, and something they have, this little token they carry around. Some other good preventative things we can do for external threats is our end user training, making sure that our employees actually know what threats look like, how to react to them, and really knowing is half the battle. I touched earlier on restricting admin access, making it harder to have that global permission to your entire network, which can be obviously much more destructive if an attacker was to gain access to that or compromise that system with a higher privileged account. They obviously can do a lot more damage, even maybe disrupting your backups for your mitigation against this. Some preventative things looking at internal threats. Now, internal threats can be, both intentional and unintentional. They could be malicious in nature or just, accidental. One thing that we'll want to do, or that a lot of businesses do, they have systems called data loss prevention, or DLP, and these systems they essentially monitor the flow of data. So if you are sending an email, sending an IM, any data in transit that's moving, it examines this and it looks for patterns in the data. It'll look for patterns like a 9-digit social security number with dashes in there. And so it has a whole list of patterns of data that it wants to protect and keep safe. And if it notices a system is trying to send it to an authorized source or something that looks suspicious, it can flag this and actually prevent the transmission of this before it gets sent. So, for example, if you have a user who, we'll take the malicious example first, the user who is trying to make off away from target with a database of social security numbers. This system, when it's trying to be copied, say they email it to themselves or they try to copy it to a thumb drive, the system would say, oh, hey, I'm looking at this data, this looks sensitive in nature, we're gonna disrupt that and not allow the copy or the transfer. So that's your data loss prevention solution. We're seeing a lot more of that recently. Some other common things, definitely restricting admin access, touched on that some earlier. That helps for both your internal and external threats, because you don't want your employees every employee to have access to every system. You really want to restrict that down to those who need access to it. Another last one I'll touch on here. Mandatory vacations is also a good protection against internal threat, and that might sound kind of strange. How does that protect you internally? One thing, especially with IT, you want to be careful of is that no one really holds all the keys in that the system can fail if that person's no longer present. So a lot of companies, they'll start implementing mandatory vacations where that user actually has to be taken off the network for 2 weeks while they go to Florida or wherever you like to vacation, and that way you can make sure that the system does still run. Your company can still operate. There's not any critical processes, whether it's an operational process gap or a technical system gap that relies on that one person. So if that person were, let's hope not die or leave the company really unexpectedly, you don't have to worry about your operations dependent on that single point of failure. A couple reactive things just really quick. The backup solution, so after you've already been attacked, really the best defenses are your backup solutions. You got your file backups, and most companies are familiar with that. Another thing to continue operations is you want redundant systems. So you want your redundant power supplies, your redundant network, because obviously the access to information is really critical to continuing business operations. If your phones go down, it's really hard to service your customers for your business to continue flowing. So that's kind of how I'd sum that up, Kevin.
Great information. I appreciate that. Fred, anything you want to add to this? Hopefully you're not on mute still.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, as you heard from Caleb, there is a long list of different security practices, systems, and things you can implement in your network. Yeah, I'm sure if we gave Caleb an unlimited budget, he could have the most secure possible network in place that nobody could ever penetrate if they ever tried. Unfortunately, most businesses don't have an unlimited IT budget, so one of the things that I would touch on from here is take the old adage of back up what you can afford to, and we can apply it to security in this scenario. Secure what you can afford to. So you really do need to create a budget for this type of activity, just like you budget for everything else, and figure out, you know, from the perspective of your business, if you had a massive data loss and had, you know, downtime and considerable impact, you know, what that cost would be, and then you can figure out what you're willing to hedge that bet against. And a lot of companies may not need the highest possible level of security. If you're running a farm in you know, Nebraska, you're handling corn, you know, it's high security for your computers and things in your accounting software, whatever that you're running, may not be as critical as it would be for a financial consulting firm. You know, their data is going to be highly confidential, highly restrictive, extremely valuable, so they're going to be a better they're going to have a bigger target on their forehead. So really, it's figure out where your valuable data is, and figure out what you need to do and what you can afford to do to protect it. So all the things that we talk about today, we need to temper that with a little bit of financial and business acumen and say, all right, so you know, multi-factor authentication, what does that do for us? How much does it cost? And is that a good investment for us? Is that a good place for us to put our capital? So there's definitely questions around that to be asked. So, you know, that's my 2 cents on that one.
Sounds good. I appreciate it. Hey, one quick note I want to add for everyone. If you have questions as we're going through this, and I should have said this up front, but feel free to enter them in the chat window, and we'll try to work them into the conversation as we go. We'd like this to be valuable to you and make sure that we're getting to the answers and questions that you're concerned about. The next question that I think makes a lot of sense here, and it's something people will typically wonder about, is what would you guys say is the single greatest security threat to an organization?
Good question, Kevin. And like most good questions, the answer is kind of, it depends. And when talking about cybersecurity, you can group most attacks and most preventative actions into 3 categories. It's called the CIA Triad: C, confidentiality; I, integrity; A, availability. And depending on your industry vertical, one of these is probably going to be a higher priority than others. A lot of my background working with the Department of Defense, it really does follow that priority of CIA. We're most concerned with confidentiality. We really don't want the enemy getting control of our data. That would be the worst case. This would also pertain to any industries, think finance or healthcare, in the sense that PCI compliance. You don't want, you're trying to prevent the release of customers' PII data, their credit card information, those sort of things. Also, obviously, healthcare, your PHI data, and I would also say any sort of research and development. If you have company secrets or valuable information that gives you a competitive advantage, obviously, if you lose that confidentiality of that information, think data breach, somebody can take that information or it gets leaked somehow. That's really what's probably going to be your priority to protect. So it's also your greatest threat if you're in one of those industries. Looking at integrity is really making sure that your data, not so much concerned with losing it to others, but really that you get to keep it yourself, that when you take data records, that they're accurate, that they don't get manipulated, they don't get deleted, that they maintain integrity and remain intact. So good examples of industries that would care about this, obviously something like banking records. If your account balances get altered, that's incredibly bad for your business. You're more concerned with keeping those records accurate than disclosing them. If somebody else knows if a stranger knows the balance of an account, yeah, that's not good. But if somebody was able to manipulate the balance of that account, that's obviously a lot worse. Some other examples of industries or verticals that would care more about integrity than confidentiality, I would say any businesses that are really big into record keeping, a lot of local and state government, including education. There's a lot of records there that, although not really destructive, if the unauthorized individuals had access to it, you want to keep it protected, obviously, but it's more damaging if that data was altered or lost. So those kinds of industries, I would say, probably prioritize keeping good integrity. And the last one, availability. This is really having access to your data, uninterrupted, continual access to the information you need to make your business run. I would actually say the majority of businesses fall here with availability. I brought up the example before. If your phone system's down and you do a lot of work with your customers on the phone, you're not generating any revenue. You're not servicing your customers. So availability for any industries that are largely service-based, that's quite important. And with that, even a higher priority, I would say, is industries that are in emergency operations. So if you work in the emergency room and your medical system's down, where you cannot access these customer records to find out, okay, this person needs surgery, are they allergic to any antibiotics? If you can't access that record 24/7 in a split second, that could be the delay of providing emergency service, which could lead to loss of life. So kind of an extreme example, but hopefully these kind of illustrate that which threat is the greatest. Depends on your industry, really. Depends on your priorities of what you want to protect, if you're concerned with your confidentiality, your integrity, or your availability.
Great, good information to have about CIA. Fred, you want to tell us a little bit about how some of this could impact the business?
Sure, Kev. So, when it comes to these different malware infections and ransomware and things like that, the impact on a business can be significant. If you look at a couple recent cases here of infections that have been, in the big news. So a few months ago, Hollywood Hospital in California got a malware infection that took their computer systems offline. And for a business, this kind of action, yeah, it's going to affect cost. It's going to affect our position in the market. It's going to affect a lot of things. It's going to cost us some money. In the This one in particular, though, this is the hospital. This is patient records, data, medicine delivery, medical data. People are in surgery, all their records and everything. I mean, you're dealing with lives in this scenario. So in this case, the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center paid the ransom to these hackers to get the decryption keys back from a malware infection. So they looked at the cost of paying the ransom versus the cost of being down for 2 days, which I believe was about $6 million, and they ended up just paying the ransom. So in this scenario, that was the only choice that they had, since they had already been affected and were basically at the mercy of the hackers. Now, two opposing instances of that were another medical center in California and one in Indiana that were under a similar attack, but with advanced systems and defense were able to hold that off and not have the dramatic impact to operations that Hollywood Hospital incurred. So they decided to take their money and spend it on some advanced protection systems instead of paying off the hackers. In this scenario, the Hollywood Hospital was looking at literally millions and millions and millions of dollars in lost revenue, in addition to the massive amount of cost to restore all their systems back to functionality. This was could have potentially been a huge loss for them. And once they restore that, there's not much keeping the hackers from re-encrypting it again and asking for some more money. So they really need to you really need to consider spending your money up front and mitigating that risk as much as you can, because it'll cost you a lot more to recover from it than to prevent it. So in this scenario, they had their data locked or lost. 6% of companies survive a massive data loss like this, and data loss where they're down for more than 3 days is considered significant. And 70% of small businesses that experience a major data loss go out of business within a year. So it's 70%. So that is a vast majority of those. So you really need to do everything you can up front to mitigate risk and protect yourself financially and business-wise to handle these things. So you definitely should spend the money up front to protect rather than to respond.
So Fred, I've actually heard that police organizations and IT security firms have had to pay ransomware as a last resort. I've even heard that the FBI actually recommends paying the ransomware if you're crypto locked. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, that's true. There were a couple of local police agencies that were infected and had no recourse. The thing about this ransomware, and it's the hottest thing going right now, because there's literally no defense for it. With their classic viruses, everybody's got antivirus in their computer. A virus gets on your machine, it intercepts it, throws it in the quarantine, keeps you protected. There is no protection for the ransomware, the crypto locking stuff out there. There's a few that are in beta. But I actually downloaded a beta on my computer a couple weeks ago and ran it, and it actually quarantined my GoToMeeting and my web root. So, definitely not ready for prime time. So as far as that one thing you can do to protect yourself, that piece of software you can install, that's not here yet, and there's no telling when it will be here. And when it does get here, how effective it'll be, because these guys create new programs for this literally every hour. So there's a number of the crypto lockers that regenerate the executable that runs the virus hourly. and then moves it to another server somewhere else in Croatia or Yugoslavia or wherever they're working out of. So you literally can't have a classic um, description-based antivirus to protect yourself from these. So really you have to have a wide variety of products in place and policies and training and procedures and everything else to protect your organization from these. So it's, like I said, it's not something you can just install and you're protected. It's a very complicated web of products and services you have to implement to really, hedge your bet against getting these infections.
So not really a silver bullet, more of a silver buckshot approach.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Fred, you talked a little bit about spending the money up front, but you've also talked about making effective use of your resources. We can't all implement all the great strategies and tools that Caleb's been describing, but maybe you and Caleb can talk a little bit about what the most cost-effective things you can do to protect your network are.
Sure. I'll go over I'll go over a couple that are absolutely free. Just no purchase of hardware or software. I mean by that respect. I think it's absolutely critical that you have good security policies in place. Some examples is definitely have a strong password policy. You could have all the firewalls and protection in the world, but if you have simple passwords that are easy to guess, or if multiple users are using the same password, bad practices like that. It doesn't matter if you're quote unquote secure if another attacker is able to mimic or authenticate as a real user, they're going to have all the access of that user. So definitely enforcing a strong password policy, to include how often passwords have to be reset, complexity and length, password history, how often you can reuse a password, such policies like that. Also, I think absolute critical is restricting administrative access. So talked about it in one of the earlier questions, but ultimately what this would enable is if users were, let's say, not local administrators on their machines, you have this policy in place. If a user downloads malware, the malware could even be, they get fooled, they download this malicious email, it has an attachment, has malware, it starts installing this virus. The user could get that far, and then the virus is only ever going to have as much permissions as that user it's being run as. So if this user is not an admin on their machine, it means it can't fully install, it can't have access to the system, so it can't, embed itself to run at startup, and has very limited access to spread to other machines. It would still, have access to all the data that user does, but if that user is, say they're in the accounting department, not a great place to get infected, but say they're in the accounting department, it's, it would have, the virus would have the reach to infect and corrupt all files this accountant has access to, but if security policies were in place, it couldn't reach your HR data or say maybe your operations data or your production manufacturing data. If you isolate what users can have access to, you definitely limit the spread of viruses, you limit the chance that they can even be installed in the first place. And so really that's a zero-cost solution for implementing that, and I'd say an absolute must for keeping systems secure. I would say the last free one I'm going to touch on is the importance of keeping your systems patched and up to date. Pretty much every application, every software out there needs continual security patches because vulnerabilities are found in the software. The developers find ways to patch or fix and update these softwares so that they are more secure against attacks, or maybe it might be more features added, but normally it's against attacks or bugs in the software, and keeping up to date on those is a free solution and definitely an important one. If we're talking about cost effective, I'd say the cheapest most cost-effective thing that actually does cost money, you definitely want endpoint protection on all your machines. If you're not running any antivirus, anti-malware, personal firewalls on your machines, you'll probably get your biggest bang for your buck right there. So there's a few free ones that I would say are musts. Really no excuse not to have those going, and really the most cost-effective single one I can think of would be your endpoint protection for your clients and your servers.
Great information, Caleb. I think that's wonderful. I've actually read several security blogs that talk about unpatched software as being one of the greatest vulnerabilities out there. Fred, what would you recommend for cost-effective solutions?
Yeah, you know, Caleb definitely goes in the more technical area of things, and I tend to look at the business impacting items or users or business process. So, you know, I think from my perspective, the most important thing you can do is know what you don't know. And you know, if you consider a security audit, for example, yeah, there's going to be cost to that because you're going to have a security expert like Caleb come in and analyze your systems and check things and figure out where the vulnerabilities are. And you don't get really a tangible increase in security from that, but you don't know what you don't know. And if you know what you don't know, then you know. So you know, I think a security audit would definitely be a high value return on that, because then you know, oh, our accounting system is wide open. I mean, anybody can get into it and get into our data, or you know, our file server has, you know, 150 missing patches. You know, we need to get that updated. So it allows you to figure out where your vulnerabilities are and where to attack first. I think that's definitely a first step for anybody out there. And while it does cost money, it's not a significant investment. The next thing up, kind of on my list, is end user training. You know, the probably one of the best returns you'll get on security investment is training your users. They're the ones that are clicking on this stuff. They're the ones that are opening malicious attachments in email. You know, you've really got to focus on the users. And one of the things we partner with a company called KnowBe4 that specializes in employee training and recurring testing to let them know or train them on, when I get an email like this, how do I know this is real? How do I know it's fake? You know, just as a perfect example, we have a customer that we don't have any kind of recurring agreement with, or they're not one of our security customers, send me an email with a virus attached to it and ask me, I don't recognize this, I'm not sure what it is, it might be a virus, should I open it? And you know, of course, it comes to me with the attachment on it. I'm like, oh, great, thanks for sending me a virus. But my response to her was, no, if you're not sure if it's a virus, then it is. You know, and that's the approach you have to take on that, is if you don't know what it's from, you weren't expecting it, you don't know who it is, you don't know what it is, delete it and you know, move on, because it's probably not something that you're going to want to open. So that level of training, you know, teaching users to look for links and look for use their brain to help, you know, be a human firewall. You know, there's a huge return on that, and it's quantifiable. The program that we use before the first training, we'll send out testing emails to the users over a couple weeks, and then it'll gather information on what they clicked on, what they opened, things like that, and then we build a custom training schedule around that to you know, train the users on, one, don't click on this. And then after the training, we wait a little while and we send those same messages out again, and then see if that number of click-throughs and openings has gone down, and then we adjust our training schedule from there. But that definitely huge return on that, because if the users aren't clicking the links or going to the bad websites in the first place, then you will get less infections, you'll have less problems. Another two things that I want to point out, communications security is really key. Two inexpensive things you can implement probably today even would be email security filtering and web filtering. And email filtering, if you have a hosted email, then usually there's some kind of security in place with that. If you have an on-prem email system or something like that, you'll want to invest in a third-party company that can filter out spam and viruses and things before it comes to your mail servers. Huge security benefit there, and it's usually a minimal investment, usually like $1, $2, or something like that per mailbox. Definitely a good one there. Web filtering, using an organization like OpenDNS to filter your web browsing, things like that will help significantly there, because they'll keep your users from actually getting to the malware distribution servers and websites, things like that. There, so those are from my perspective, those are definitely a good return on investment there and very cost effective.
Great, yeah, so training and then getting certain basic filtering security up, that's good. And of course the main thing too is keeping things going. Don't be secure for 6 months and stop what you're doing, right? So,
yeah, it's the sustained effort is the key.
Right. So we do have a quick question here from Christopher. Christopher had the question of whether or not a Linux-based file server would protect your files from ransomware. And I don't know if Caleb or, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can take that one. So just to give an overview for the audience, so file shares are the way that if you have any shared files on your network, those are typically stored on a server. Shared files would be files that multiple users on your network can access and collaborate with, stored to a central location typically. That's your file server. So most common file servers today are Windows-based file servers. Linux is another operating system that is not Microsoft, is not Windows, that offers similar file sharing capabilities. So the question is, if we use a Linux file server instead of a Windows-based one, can we be protected from ransomware? Which is a great question. So the way that, I'm going to give a little bit of background on how the ransomware typically infects itself. The most common way it'll deploy is to, normally actually through email, to a specific user. That user opens the email, the cryptoware gets installed, and then what that cryptoware starts doing, it starts looking at all the, because it runs with the credentials as that user, because the user told it to run probably by accident, right? So it starts looking at what are all the files I can access as Caleb, right? And it'll say, okay, well, all these files on my local computer, I can see all these, I can read, I can write to them. So it's going to start encrypting different ones. Normally, like your Word documents, your Excels, all the stuff you don't want encrypted, that's hard to get back. So if you have files on a network share, many variants of CryptoLocker, cryptoware will actually see, oh, not only do I have access as Caleb to these files on my local machine, I have access to these shares out here, right? Because you collaborate and certain shares you have access to. And go, okay, well, I see shares out here and on this Windows file server, and I also see shares on this Linux file server. If you have access to those, or if Caleb has access to those, that means the cryptoware has access to those, and it will start encrypting those the same way. So whether it's a Windows-based file share or Linux-based, it doesn't really add much protection. Separate scenario where it could. One good advantage of Linux is because it's lower popularity, less viruses are written for it. You hear that a lot about Macs as well. So because there's less viruses written for them, that email that came over that had an attached virus to it, if it was opened on a Linux machine, if you were on a Linux machine and you open that, the installer for the little cryptoware probably wouldn't even install because it was built for Windows trying to run on Linux. So if you had a user on a Linux machine, when they open their cryptoware software, it could protect you in that case, but that's quite atypical. More typical is they're on a Windows box, opening their email, get a Windows-based CryptoLocker software. Does that answer your question there, Christopher?
If not, Christopher, we can certainly address this offline as well. We'll have our contact information at the end of the presentation. All right, guys. Looking at looking at this, if I'm a business owner, again, a lot of great suggestions here. But what can I do on my own? What security can I implement on my own, and which do I really need experts for?
Okay. Yeah, I would say that one of the best uses to reach to somebody outside is if you're doing any sort of audit. You can't really audit yourself, so I would say if you want an assessment done, go external for that. I would say also if you're a smaller business looking to do continuous monitoring as one of your reactive defenses against being attacked. If you're a smaller business, maybe you don't have enough staff for 24/7 IT support monitoring because of your limited staff numbers. Reaching out to another business could be useful for that. And I would also say that also if you're small, the software systems you might have in place to monitor, the software investment, the capital investment to get those running might not make sense to try to do it yourself. If you reach out to somebody who already has that implemented, those services running, that can probably save you money there as well.
Yeah, and in addition to those, a couple of other quick things. I know we're already running long. I mean, we could probably talk about this for hours easily. But doing things like the running your email through a filter, that's not a complicated thing. Setting up web filtering is not a super complicated thing. But definitely getting into the monitoring and the interpretation of data is definitely, we definitely recommend going to a third party for that, somebody that specializes in it. Because even myself, as long as I've been in IT, I can look at an SEIM log and my eyes just glows over. Caleb looks at those daily and knows exactly what to look for and what patterns to look for in the logging information, and can see a lot more in there than even I can. So the average business owner is not going to be able to sift through data like that and get useful information out of it.
Great. So we've looked at things and we've covered most of the basics, I think, of security and how we would approach security. But guys, what would some advanced security practices be that are less commonly implemented that people could maybe look at depending on their level of concern with security?
Sure. Yeah. Fred talked a little bit about the human firewall, which is kind of tied to your end user training. BMI has a unique product that we offer that not only offers training but kind of checks on it. It tests the user and continually recertifies. So it's not just one directional, hey, we're teaching you, and then it actually does a test through kind of simulated attacks to see, okay, who needs remedial training. Fred also talked a little bit about OpenDNS. You don't see a lot of this solution out there, but it's another offering that we often recommend, and it uses I'm trying to keep my answer short here. It has good defense against zero-day attacks. So as soon as say a new CryptoLocker comes out and it's attacked from I don't know, Yugoslavia again, right? So there's an IP in Yugoslavia that's known to do all these attacks. This OpenDNS will actually say, oh, we're seeing a lot of attacks from here, and kind of cut off the rest of your network from ever talking to that one IP as soon as it starts being hot. So it can actually catch it just before it even infects your network and starts blocking off traffic to known attackers. There's also a APT blocker that does it kind of, if anybody's downloading programs which might or might not be safe, it kind of runs the program first in a sandbox environment on its own little server and looks at the results of that to see if it was malicious or if it did make like serious system changes, and if so, it blocks it from even being downloaded in the first place. That's kind of one of the ransomware blockers that's supposed to defend against that. Yeah, I'll leave my answer at that. Fred, do you have anything?
Sure. One of the other things that there's a lot of companies out there that do web blockers or some kind of web filtering at some level, but there's not a lot that run application level blocking. Application control is definitely something that you should look at as far as managing what applications can run on your systems, what application can access in and out of your firewalls, controls, and in and out of your network as another aspect of control. One of the other things that's come up recently is the proliferation of BOIOD, bring your own device to work, where you have your employees bring their own phone or their own tablet or their own other device and access company data on that. Having a management system for that is you know, it's going to be a huge area of concern over the next couple of years, because you know that tablet is outside of the control of IT. So we have to have some way to manage what goes on and off of that there. So definitely consider BYOD options. Intrusion prevention systems, definitely another area that a lot of SMBs don't have those in place. I think those are going to be more and more necessary going forward, because I mean, these attacks just keep escalating. It's just going to keep getting worse. So these things that have been historically just for larger businesses will be down into the mom and pop shops over the next couple of years. And then the last thing I would say would be routine audits of your security. Having an expert come in and run scans and audit the systems regularly, and making sure the updates are keeping up, and that the rules are getting updated, and your definitions and things are all getting updated, and everything is up to current as much as possible. But of all the things out there, you really need to develop a security system based on your company's needs. You may have certain compliance needs. You may have very low security needs. Like I said, you may be running a farm or a company that makes simple tools and whatnot. You don't really have much to protect. You don't really have credit card data or anything like that. Security might not be as much of a problem for you as it is for other companies. So having the right level of security is one thing that companies miss out on a lot. They either got too much or too little.
Great. Yeah, definitely want to have it customized to your needs. I'm going to just ask you guys one thing. If there's one thing, maybe two things that you would recommend that somebody does today to help make their network more secure, what would it be?
I'll let you take this one.
Sure. I'd say the thing you can do right now is implement a password policy. That's every, and hackers haven't been around for a while. They don't really know how to hack. Often called script kiddies. They're just running scripts looking for penetration and running password books and dictionaries. Password policies will help prevent that. Implement email security. Get something filtering out your spam and your viruses and your bad links and things in email. Definitely. Caleb said, implementing restriction to administrator access on machines. Absolutely. No user should be running as an administrator on their desktop and on the network. Even myself, my computer right now, I'm set up as a user because I know that's a huge defense against malware, and I've got a dedicated admin account that I can use when I need to do something that requires that level. Schedule security audit. Contact somebody, BMI or no, but contact somebody and have them come look at your security. Like I said, you don't know what you don't know until you know. So get that. And really just engage with a trusted, dedicated security provider that knows what they're doing and is able to come help you with your business in mind and develop a solution that fits both your company and your organization and your budget. So that's what I got.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And if we look around, and if I'm going to roll up some of what we talked about here, if we want to look at what you guys can do now to address your security issues, first thing foremost, pretty clear, don't ignore the problem. It's not something that's going to go away. It's not something that's going to change or get easier to deal with. Caleb and Fred both talked about fixing the easy things. There's some cost-effective, simple ways that you can start addressing your security. And as Fred just mentioned, scheduling a security audit can be a big help to this. How would he say it so eloquently? You don't know what you know until you know. I'm probably messing that up, but you get the picture.
You don't know what you don't know until you know.
I love it. I love it. Great. And then, go ahead and, develop a strategy. Have a way to address these things going forward. We're right at time now, and we want to thank everyone for joining us here. I did want to put up the slide with our security not our security information, with our contact information. You can feel free to reach out to me, or if you have a question specifically for Fred or Caleb, go right ahead and reach out to them. That's the end of our presentation. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Kim, I would say back to you.
Thank you very much. Awesome, guys. Only one last thing. Christopher put in a comment, OpenDNS. And I'm not sure if you wanted to make a comment on that before we let everybody go.
Well, I can give you a quick 30-second on it. OpenDNS is a system provided by the company called OpenDNS. The product is actually called Umbrella. But they're a subsidiary of the Cisco Corporation, and what they do is they maintain highly secured DNS servers that you route your queries to from your network. And in their secure DNS servers, they have blacklist sites, they have IPs, addresses, FQDNs, things like that, of malware distribution sites and categorized sites and things like too. So if you have if you want to do filtering in your organization, like keep your employees from going to pornographic sites or sites with hate speech or things like that, and any kind of negative sites you don't want to go to, OpenDNS Umbrella can provide that service, but they block malware distribution sites, drive-by websites, things like that.
Excellent.
I'll also add that they work with by installing a software agent on all your clients, and can actually even does even more than when you use the agent, it does even more than just DNS resolution. It also can provide security for any IP-based connections, so stopping a lot of the crypto lockers from beaconing home and some other cool features like that. It's quite a list of what it'll do. But yeah, OpenDNS Umbrella is the product.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Thanks for that extra comment, Christopher. That was good education. And again, always fun listening to you guys over lunch. This was very educational. And again, we'll put a copy of this recording up on our LinkedIn library, our YouTube library, so that you can go back, listen, and share. Good information, guys. Thank you so much. Everybody,
Thank you.
have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good day.